3 times we meet. It's going to be just a lot of logistics, introductions, getting to know each other, talking about the course structure, but hopefully that's helpful because you can ask questions if you need to, unlike a video presentation, which is what I'll typically do most weeks. But you can still ask questions, but I mean like in real time, ask questions. So I'm going to go to our Canvas page and show you how it's structured. Hopefully most of you have already opened it and looked at it a little bit, but I have it in student view right now. It's just a basic Canvas page, right? And I have only shared parts of the assignments. So more assignments will be revealed and visible to you as we go along week by week. But I did want to start with the syllabus and just kind of going over parts of the syllabus. Feel free to click hand raise if you need any clarification at any point. And I'm not going to read it all, obviously. This class does have a prerequisite of ASL 203. I have overridden that prerequisite for a few of you, and the reason that I've done that is because every lecture video that I provide in ASL, I also will provide a voiceover in English. So if your ASL skills are not quite there yet to be able to like follow the lecture entirely in ASL, you can choose to have the English as well. So I think this class is, the way that I teach it, is really doable at a variety of levels of ASL. But we will mostly be using English, spoken English for class discussions. Yeah, Jesse.
I just wanted to say that I noticed too when I watched one of the videos with I had the ASL and the English one playing at the same time, and they match up almost like perfectly. So I just wanted to say that too.
Okay, cool. Usually what I'll do is if I offer it both, some lecture videos will only be in English just because I get short on time, especially as the term goes on. But usually what I'll do is I'll sign the lecture and then provide an interpretation of that. So hopefully they match pretty well. Yeah, Alexis.
Okay. This is gonna sound kind of condescending, but it's not meant that way at all. So please don't take it that way. But if someone is in a higher level, do you want them to watch the ASL video and disregard the English video then? Does it matter to you? Do you have a preference?
Totally your choice. Totally your choice. Either whatever works for you and your learning and what your goals are with your learning. I also think as interpreting students, it can be beneficial to have both, to look and watch it both simultaneously, to kind of have that comparison of language too, or do one and then the other. Whatever works for you is totally your call. And maybe it might be whatever you have time for that week, right? Or maybe you're busy and you don't have like the ability to watch and write something at the same time, whatever, there's all these kind of factors, but no preference for me on my end. Okay, so we have our synchronous meetings. Hopefully you have them all on your calendar, have this time carved out. Today, the 25th, will be our second meeting. That I'm really looking forward to. We're going to do a panel of interpreters that are going to talk to you all about burnout and how to mitigate burnout in your work, in your future work. So we'll have an assignment before that where I'll kind of collect some questions that you might have for them. And then we'll get to chat with some fabulous colleagues. And then May 16th is our last one. And I'm really looking forward to that too. One of my friends and colleagues will be joining us. Her name is Sari Higginson. And actually you will be observing her and I do supervision for this class. So you'll have an assignment, if you haven't looked already, that's called Observation of Supervision, where it's a video of me leading her through a case. And what's really cool about you all doing this class with these synchronous sessions is then you'll have a chance to actually talk to her during that last session and kind of pick her brain a little bit or ask her some follow-up questions, see what decisions she made after we had that supervision session and where it's led her so far, because we did that in the fall. So the video you'll be watching, and then we'll get to interact with Sari herself on May 16th. Yeah, Jesse.
What do you mean by supervision? Like, do you mean like reviewing like an assignment together kind of thing, or like what exactly?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of you might not be familiar with demand control schema supervision. We do talk about it in 254. It's like case presentations. So the idea is interpreters meet together and talk about an ethical issue that they're having, and then they kind of go through the framework of demand control schema to kind of talk and look at ethical aspects of that conflict or that demand or a variety of demands and things. So that is, you'll see an example of that, and hopefully that'll give you a better idea of what that practice can look like too. All right, so textbooks, there is a textbook. So I just want to, let me grab it. I just want to check with you all, how many of you have this book already? Give me a thumbs up on like the reactions if you already have this book. Okay, a lot of you. Yeah, okay. Okay, it's looking like close to half of you have it, which is great. Here's the thing, we're going to use 2 specific chapters from this book. So my offer is that if you don't have the paper copy yourself yet, and you don't feel up to buying it for this specific class this term, just send me an email and I'll send you an electronic PDF of the 2 chapters we're going to use for this term. If you already have it, great. You're going to use it in multiple classes, like it's used throughout the program. So I would say when you can buy it, but I'm not going to require anybody purchase it for this specific class. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, the offer's there. If you need electronic copy of those 2 chapters, just let me know. I believe the reading for those 2 chapters is next week. So I can just email you the PDF. All right. So the learning outcomes for our class, these are important parts of your learning. Just to be able to define intrapersonal demands will be part of intrapersonal, so that not inter, right? Do we know the difference between inter and intra? That's important to make sure you're spelling correctly when you're doing your assignments, because I see inter used instead of intra, and it's important to know the difference for this class. So sometimes I think spell check will try to change it to inter because it doesn't recognize intrapersonal as an actual word. So if you have a red squiggle line under that word, know that you spelled it right. You're okay. But I will correct you if I'm reading stuff and you're continually saying inter with ER instead of intra when this class is specifically about intrapersonal. So demands and controls that are specific to the interpreter, that the interpreter brings to that setting, to that work, and that the interpreter's feelings, their thoughts, all of that, their thought worlds. A second learning outcome is to identify intrapersonal demands while observing communication and human interaction. So you'll do 2 different observations of settings throughout this term that will hit on that learning outcome. You'll apply concepts within the DCS framework. So our observations will use the demand control schema framework and the form. If you were in my 254 class, it's that same form we used for our observation there. Identify their individual intrapersonal profile, which will be your final, is a cool project where you kind of get to explain who you are and parts of who you are and how you think that will impact you in your future practice, and articulate some of the ethical considerations and implications of the intrapersonal control demand dynamic within interpreting work. And we'll talk about that more during next week because you'll read about kind of the difference between intrapersonal controls and demands and be able to kind of decipher the 2. Okay, so what is your grade based on? 30% of it will be lecture activities. This is the first week's lecture activity. And the weeks that we don't have synchronous sessions, we will have online asynchronous Pear Decks. So if you've taken my class before, it's that same thing. I'll give you a link and you'll kind of like click slide through slide. There'll be a video lecture you'll watch, and then you'll respond to some questions on a Pear Deck. So it looks a lot like this, if those of you who haven't done that before. except that you have control of when to click to the next slide and to respond to the questions. And you do that on your own time, but it's going to be 2 Sundays before midnight. Again, that's only the weeks when we don't have these Zoom meetings. So there'll be those 3 weeks when you won't have that to do. You just need to show up here and participate and play here. Observations are 15% of your grade. Those are those 2 observations that we have due, and I'll show you where that's at on Canvas. You'll have a weekly reflection / journal, and I will show you more of that on Canvas. So every week that will be due on Sundays by midnight as well. And then the observation of supervision. So that's what I was mentioning with Sari, that you will watch us go through a case presentation with her, and then you'll do a little write-up about it. And then your final is called the intrapersonal profile, and I'll show you more about that on Canvas as well. And the rest is all just standard syllabus stuff. So let's go to Canvas and take a look at how I'm like organizing and structuring these parts. So we'll use the same Zoom link every time we meet synchronously. So if you ever are looking for it or can't find it, you can always find it in this part of our Canvas shell. This is the weekly reflection and journal. So I haven't made visible yet the week 1 prompt. I will do that after we finish here today. You'll be able to start the first week because I wanted part of what we'll discuss today for you to reflect on with this first journal entry. But the way that it works, I forgot to tell you, there'll be a few questions on Pear Deck after I finish to check your comprehension and see if you're understanding the parts of the class that I'm explaining here. So there's a description here, one in ASL and one in English. And every week I'll have a different prompt for you to respond to. And I can't remember what it's called, but it basically looks like a discussion board between you and I, but I am the only one who can see your response. So everyone has the same prompt every week, but when you type your response, it only goes to me. I see it, and then I will respond every week too to what you shared. And those are worth 3 points each week, so over 10 weeks, so 30 points altogether and 30% of your grade. And those are really just opportunities for you to apply what we're talking about in the lecture activities. And also I use these to kind of build what will eventually be your intra-personal profile. So by the time you're ready to start doing your final, I hope that you can look through your reflections and kind of like pick out different parts that you want to use for your final. Okay. So that's the journal. That's due every Sunday at midnight. You do have one for this week. You will have one for this week that I'll make visible after we're done meeting. This is where you'll find the lecture activities. You'll see class meeting on the weeks that we have these Zoom meetings. And you don't have to do anything for this week because you showed up here. I have your attendance and participation counted, and I will enter a grade for that week 1 to show that you showed up and participated. So those are worth 3 points every week as well. They'll be due Sunday at midnight as well. And like I said, there'll usually be a Pear Deck link where you just click and then kind of go through my presentation and my slides each week. And you respond to them, and that's how you get your 3 points for your lecture activity. There is, for this class, I do assign like a reading before you do the lecture activity. So part of my questions within those lecture activities are kind of checking to make sure you did the reading and kind of helping you apply what you read in the reading and make better sense of it through my lecture. So the next part is your observations. So the first observation is due April 28th. So you still have a little bit of time. So I think this syllabus said this was worth, here it is, I'm forgetting what percentage of your grade. So the observations are worth 15% total. So between observation 1 and 2, they're worth 15 points, 5 and 10. And then this observation of supervision is 10 points. Yeah, so the first observation is pretty simple. You pick a setting in which there's not an interpreter working. So you're not observing a working interpreter. Choose a setting that you can anticipate possibly interpreting sometime. So you pick a setting and then you're going to fill out this observation form. And this observation form is only the intra-personal parts of the full DCS observation form. And then I have a couple questions for you to respond to and reflect on as well. So this is pretty simple. I do allow you to use like streamed events, recorded events, if they're within the term, within the time of the term. You can use those for these. That don't have to be live events. And again, I would really love for you to pick settings in which you think you might interpret, or settings that you think might be challenging for you personally, like you think like, ooh, I don't know if I could handle that as an interpreter. Like what kind of feelings, what kind of thoughts would come up for me if I was interpreting in this place? Because I think that will really encourage the most growth and learning for you. Yeah, Alexis?
Never mind, you answered my question. Sorry.
No problem. All right, so that's the first observation. Next will be the observation of supervision. There's a link here to the video that you'll watch. And that's again of Sari and I going through a case presentation using demand control schema supervision. And then you will just write a reflection paper responding to these prompts. Pretty simple. And then you have your second observation due May 26th. These should be Sundays as well, are they not? I should have made sure of that. May 26th is a Friday. Maybe I had them due on Fridays. Let me check the other dates. 12th is a Friday. Yeah. Okay. So I did decide to make these due on Fridays instead of the Sundays. So keep that in mind when you're planning. Yeah, when to submit everything. So the second observation is worth more points than the first one because it's lengthier. You'll actually do a full DCS form. And again, you're going to choose a setting where there is no interpreter working. So you're not making comments or notes about an interpreter's choices. You're observing a setting in which you might interpret someday, and you're filling out the entire form for it. And then adding a reflection paper with these prompts that are specific to the intra-personal part of that observation. And that will be due at the end of May. And then you will have a final, the intra-personal profile. You can read on here, but I really wanted to make this project creative as possible. So you could choose what language you want to present in. You could choose to write a paper if you wanted to. You could do a slideshow presentation with embedded videos, similar to like maybe my lecture activities kind of a thing. Students did a lot of different ideas. Prezis were pretty popular for students to use, where it just kind of like went through each part of this content that's outlined here. You could do audio recording, you could do video recordings, you could just use text if you wanted to, but as long as it includes responses to those prompts, you're good. And I put in a list of resources of like different ideas and technology that I was thinking might be nice to use for this. And I do have one example, a great example that a student submitted in the fall, if you want to look at theirs for ideas too. It's a Prezi that student created for that final. So that is Canvas and what we're looking at for the rest of the term. I tried to make it pretty simple. The weekly assignments are going to be due Sundays at midnight every single week. I will try to always have the lecture activities ready for you a week prior to when they're due. So that's another thing about my class is like I really do read your responses and change class content based on your responses. So I don't have every lecture created for the whole term. I will develop the videos as I get to know you all and understand what you might need more clarity on, or you know what's going well. So I will give you those week by week. You'll see those become visible as we go through the term. Yeah, the journals are always due Sundays at midnight, and I will have the prompt up at least 1 week before they're due as well. So if you wanted to get started on it, like if you always wanted to be 1 week ahead of these things, you could. And then you have the observations and what was the other one? The observations and the final, I guess. And those are available for you to look at now if you wanted to get started early. So, any questions? Okay, then we're going to have some questions on Pear Deck, and I'm going to see